Hello to the Forge faithful match day preview, and this is some match we are teeing up for you. Forge FC, Cavalry FC, Saturday, September 10th, 5 p.m. at Tim Hortons Field. It's not only are these two clubs rivals, there's so much at stake. Let's get right in and let's get to the table because Forge has 6 matches left on the regular season schedule, and so it is time. If ever there was a time to standings watch, it's right now. Atletico Ottawa still in top spot, 40 points after 23 matches. They haven't won in 3. They have a couple of draws their last 2 matches. Still though, hanging on, and that's because the top 4 clubs, at least the top 4 clubs as of a week ago, just have not been in fine form. And this is why this is why the Canadian Premier League is great. Any match, doesn't matter who's playing, anything can happen. Atletico Ottawa, who many didn't expect to even, maybe not even a playoff team, I don't know, but certainly not the top team in the CPL right now, though. That's the way it is looking, at least statistically, when you look at the table. So 23 matches for Atletico Ottawa, 40 points. Cavalry, 38 points. Forge, 36. You can see how tight it is. Forge, though, with a match in hand on both Ottawa and Cavalry. Valor, completely out of nowhere. If you want to know where I was wrong, it was like a month ago when I counted Valor out. Apparently, I jumped the gun a little bit. Lesson learned. Valor, though, very much in the playoff picture. They're in 4th spot. That would round out your top 4 clubs. Valor, by the way, tied with Forge FC after beating them back-to-back last week in Winnipeg. Forge, though, again, played one less match, so they do have a match in hand on Valor. And then in 5th is Pacific, the defending CPL champions, who look a lot different this year. And it's reflective in the fact that they're on a 3-match losing streak. They're 1 point out of a playoff spot with a match in hand on Valor. So here we go. Cavalry, Forge, right slap dab in the middle of that 4-team race. Let's say that 4-team playoff picture. Now, Charlie O'Connor-Clark, CanPL.ca. He's a writer. He's a podcast host. He does it all. He knows this league as well, probably better than anybody else. So he's going to help us break this matchup down between Forge and Cavalry and give us more of a Cavalry perspective, because we get trapped in our Forge bubble because it's nice in here. Why not? So we'll learn a little bit more about Cavalry with Charlie O'Connor-Clark, and he joins us right now. All right, Charlie. Well, the players have said it, the coaches, it hasn't quite looked like Forge FC over the last 4 games or so. At this point, all signs point to something going on mentally, and I don't know. I mean, what have you seen differently in Forge over the last stretch compared to that 6-game winning streak, besides the obvious where they were scoring at will, essentially?
Yeah, that's kind of it, really. The attack has dried up a little bit, so to speak. Scoring 1 goal in your last 4 games is a pretty clear indication something is wrong with the highest scoring team in the league by some considerable margin as well. And part of it is there's a lot of attacking players in this squad, and I think you have times in seasons where chemistry comes and goes. You have different players getting minutes, different players not on the bench. And it is one of the tougher problems for Bobby Smirniotis to figure out, is to find out which of these players works best together, where they belong in games, what the best way to use them all is. And I think that you're still looking for some of those ideal combinations. And again, just there's been a little bit less energy, a little bit less, of that, really impressive, incisive ball movement that we've seen at some of the highest points of this team. So there's definitely some things that this club is kind of working out at a bit of a lull in the season for them.
Yeah, and it's only that, but the clean. I think when we talk about the turnovers, because that's and the possession and things that Forge are usually pretty good at. I looking at the halftime stats against the last match against Valor, and Valor with the upper hand in possession, which is almost, in a Forge match, you always expect Forge to have possession, but even that they've had difficulty with. They just haven't looked like the same club. And so your point's a good one. Now, Cavalry, for those of us who have been in our Forge bubble here, Give us the kind of quick synopsis of Cavalry this season, because they've had their ups and downs as well, it seems.
Yeah, they're actually not in too dissimilar a spot to where Forge are at the moment, to be honest. They've also had some very high moments during the season, some quite long winning or undefeated streaks, but like Forge, August was maybe not their best month. They've lost, I think they've lost two in a row now since they beat Forge in that late winner back at Spruce Meadows a few weeks ago. They haven't or they I think they've won once since then, but they've had a couple other disappointing defeats. They got beaten pretty badly at home by Atletico Ottawa a couple weeks ago. They couldn't manage to put a goal past Halifax over the weekend or on Labor Day. So they're actually having a similar trouble in attack, and again, a similar kind of challenge for Tommy Wheeldon Jr. has been finding which players are best suited to play together up front and what's going to give him the most clinical goal scoring and the best combinations up there. But they're actually in a bit of a similar spot to Forge, with just kind of the same problems that maybe fire isn't quite there, and it's maybe going to start to come back in September because all of these teams are a lot more pressured in the top four than I think they were expecting. So again, a lot of teams here looking to kind of find their form again after some tough weeks in August.
Well, I mean, how would you describe Calvary's style, even just tactically?
Yeah, Cavalry have always been one of the more aggressive teams in the league. They've, especially since 2019, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. has always spoken about this kind of 90 minutes of hell approach to playing a soccer game, where they're constantly down your throat, they're pressing you, they're very direct with the ball, they're very, very physical usually, which is something that most opponents will mention when they talk about what it's like to play Cavalry. So you'll come out of the game definitely aware that you've just played 90 minutes of difficult football against a tough team to play against. They defend very well. They love to play out of the back because they have some center backs who can do that very well, with Karifa Yao, Dan Klomp, Mason Trafford, David Norman, all these guys. And then they've got a lot of dangerous options from set pieces. They're arguably one of the best teams in the league, or the best team in the league, at scoring from those corners and those free kicks, with the likes of Jose Escalante can whip one in from pretty much anywhere, and they've got a lot of height in the box that can really make you pay for giving them those opportunities and set pieces. So they are a difficult team with a lot of ways that they can hurt you as well.
So, I mean, a club that plays in a lot of ways similar to Forge as well, which is why their matchups are usually quite entertaining. So with Forge now, they're getting healthier. Bobby mentioned this week that Daniel Crutzen, Chris Nanko at 100% in training, which is good news for Forge. But when you mention chemistry and you have so much quality and trying to find minutes for everybody, it is a nice problem to have, but it can still be a problem. So I mean, how does Crutzen and Nanko, how do they fit into this current squad in your opinion?
Yeah, it is again a tricky situation, especially with Nanko up front, because you have, as we've mentioned, so many players that are looking for minutes in that predominantly a front three. You've got Tristan Borges, David Schwanier, even Jordan Hamilton is maybe not finding those consistent starting minutes that we might have expected. But there's so many names in there that you have to fit in, and you add Chris Nanko to that. He's quite a different player to say guys like Borges and Schwanier. He's maybe a little more direct. He can get in behind a little bit more rather than cutting inside. And I think that's going to be something interesting that Bobby Smirniotis will like to see, a bit of a different element. And then at the back, you have to find a way to put Daniel Crutzen in the side because he's arguably the best defender in the CPL. And I think that even more than just adding that to your back line, it would allow Bobby to put Alex Ashinioti Johnson up into midfield where he likes to play and where he's much more comfortable, and where again, he's one of the best at his position in the entire CPL. So I think that would probably go a long way to helping Forge's problems. And I think, with these guys coming back, they're players that Bobby Smirniotis will definitely feel compelled to find a place for in his squad.
All right, and I know you're a busy guy, but I just want to look at this top five, let's say, right now on the table. I was one of the people that counted Valor out. Obviously, that was a big mistake because they've clawed all the way back. Do we have at least a clearer picture of maybe who the tier one clubs are, or is it just kind of a clump of teams right now still trying to differentiate themselves from the rest?
I think it's still a clump, and arguably more so than it was even a month ago. I think that I wouldn't be surprised by any of these five teams at the top really being the ones that end up missing out just because of how thin the margins are and how much we've seen that any of these teams can beat the other on pretty much any day. And most of them do play each other at least a couple times down the stretch here, with each team with 5 or 6 games left on the schedule.
Right.
They have games against each other. So if any of them are switched off for one of those big results, you could find yourself on the outside looking in come October 9th when the season ends. And I think that's going to be really, really exciting because the margins are just going to be so slim. We might have some lower scoring games, I think, down the stretch when teams are a little bit more cautious and afraid to make those mistakes in these games. But the intensity is going to be there. We're basically going to have a full month of playoff-like games before the actual playoffs start because it's just so close right there at the moment. And all of these teams know just how quickly the standings can change and have done for the last few weeks.
Charlie O'Connor Clark, insightful as always. CanPL.ca, your destination for all things CPL. What can we expect this week? What do you have for us?
Lots of stuff coming up. We're gonna, continue to break down this playoff race. I think after this weekend, we probably won't have any clearer a view of it, but I think we're gonna continue to push out some more stuff with the players that we've been speaking to recently and the managers that we're going to keep speaking to try and think about what these next few weeks, this last maybe month of the season is going to look like. So keep an eye on CanPL.ca.
Charlie O'Connor Clark, thanks so much. Now, if you have not had a chance, however you get your Forge content, podcast, YouTube, 2 things you can subscribe to, by the way, to make sure you don't miss any Forge content. ForgeFC.ca, social media, wherever you get your content. You there's a lot to catch up on this week. Behind the Beard, I had a chat with Bobby Smirniotis. You can hear that in its entirety on Behind the Beard. We also have a new focus on Forge this week where we focus on rejuvenation, refresh. Forge back home now after a lengthy road trip that was just a bit of a mess. It did not look like Forge on that road trip. I'm not sure who traveled. It wasn't Forge. I don't know who that team was. It did not look like Forge. I can tell you though, I've been to training this week. The Forge is back. The actual Forge was there, at least through training. Will it translate to this match against Calvary? Well, it kind of has to. I mean, Forge is at a point now where they can't afford to have some of these letdowns anymore. Hopefully it's all out of their system. So more on that on the focus on Forge from this week, which you can catch up on. You'll hear from Bobby Smirniotis in that, Tristan Borges, and also Abu Sissoko. Couple things. You heard it there when I was talking to Charlie, but I want to get a little more in depth here on the pending returns. Daniel Crutzen, Chris Nanko, 2 very key components in those Forge FC championship runs. They're at 100%. I don't think they've both been at 100% at the same time. Definitely not in 2022. Maybe sometime before that. I don't know. I mean, they definitely played on the same field together, and that's why Forge has been so successful to this point in the CPL. Both are at 100%. We don't know for sure if they're going to play against Calvary on Saturday, but they are available, and that's what matters. And both bring different skill sets, and also when we talk about Forge's attack, we know what we get from a guy like Borges, who, by the way, he's played wing all season. Last match, he was moved to the middle of the field, and it looks like, again, with Bobby Smirniotis, we never really know. If I had to make a prediction, I would guess that Borges will be back playing that in that attacking midfield position as that number 10, which I believe, if you heard our last match in review with Jessica Lisi, our analyst, she very much agrees that Borges is maybe better suited for playing that middle of the field, just because it really allows him to unleash all that those different skill sets, the playmaking ability, the vision, and all that. And he can score from range too, which is an excellent quality to have in your number 10. Does that free up a spot for Chris Nanko? Will Forge come out with something a little different? We're not sure. But in Nanko, you have that, the change of pace is, especially when you have the depth that Forge has. Nanko brings a little something different, and that's that pacey ability, as kind of a true winger to get in behind defenders. Nanko can bring that. He's a front foot guy. He's always on the attack. Tempo, we know how much this team loves to play with tempo. Nanko's a tempo guy, no question about that. Daniel Crutzen, Bobby said it this week. Again, if you go back and listen to some of the interview with Bobby we did this week, arguably, now it's not arguable in the Forge camp. They'll tell you Daniel Crutzen's the best defender in the CPL. At worst, you can say he's one of the best. And there's no arguing that. Because not only can he match any defender step for step in terms of just true defending, he has unbelievable skill with the ball in his feet. He can get out of tight spaces. He can make the right passes. It's quick with him. He's very decisive, and he brings a new element for a team that likes to play with possession and likes to continuously go forward. That's the exact kind of defender you want on your team. So the addition of Daniel Crutzen to this lineup down the stretch and heading into the postseason is so important. And it's great that he is finally at 100% after that ACL injury. Maybe we'll see them. Maybe we won't. But the possibility is there. Now, if you have not yet, I highly recommend you purchase your tickets for Saturday's match. I mean, first of all, you get Cavalry and Forge, which is always our favorite matchup to watch, right? I mean, two very similar teams with that attacking mindset, the physicality, the aggressiveness. You like when those two worlds, when you have two clubs that play that similar style colliding, you get fireworks, and which is why we have, and why these two have been rivals since season 1. That's reason enough alone to head on down to Tim Hortons Field this weekend. On top of that, it's Greek night at Tim Hortons Field, so we can celebrate that, and it's the September special. Forge have been away from home too long. This is their first home match of the month, and it's a big one. September special, Bench Brewing and Forge FC teaming up. $29.99 will get you a ticket to the match in the gold level section, so you'll get great seats, and included in that $29.99 is bench beer sampling. So you get your bench beer, you get your tickets for $29.99, and on top of that, beer is only $5 until kickoff. And I mean, listen, it's September, right? It's just, there's that falls in the air. It's refreshing, rejuvenating, an opportunity for Forge and an opportunity for you to get on down to Tim Hortons Field and take in the sights and sound of Forge soccer. I am going to be there. Now, my only hope is that I also see you there. Stay tuned. 3 keys to the match will be posted shortly. And then, of course, immediately following Cavalry and Forge, we'll have a full breakdown, a match in review. So much Forge content, so much action. Make sure you're a part of it. We'll talk to you soon.
We are the Forge, the mighty, mighty Forge. You just don't think you understand.
Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.